talking about challenges that really do affect a majority of women here. That being said, this list isn't exhaustive. There's always going to be something unique that might come up for women that we can't address today, but certainly we can address one. So our first challenge, oh, that got cut off, sorry about that, is the wage and employment gap. So this is a really difficult issue, a really difficult challenge for women because it's a systematic issue. There's only so much we can do outside of changing the whole system when combating this issue, so it's pretty difficult. That being said, it's not impossible. So we will talk about the solutions to some of these challenges later in the presentation, but right now, just talking a little bit about what this type of risk presents for women is, first and foremost, these two major causes in what contributes to the wage and unemployment gap. For women, it's going to be the smaller checks and the lack of time in the workforce due to whatever that might be. And the smaller checks, unfortunately, we can't do much about. However, there's ways we can mitigate the effects of that. But what are the effects? The effects of being out of the workforce for whatever reason and the effects of those smaller checks is, of course, less money in your pocket. And because of that, you have less money to save and less money to invest, which overall will lead to less growth opportunities, less money down the road, and essentially less money for you to do with whatever future goals that you might have. So they can really put you back. So there needs to be some way to acknowledge this challenge and be able to mitigate the issues and the effects that go with it. Second, we have unexpected life changes. So, first and foremost, obviously, unexpected life changes can happen to anybody, not just women. But there's particular life changes that can happen to a woman and a man that are particularly harsher when it comes to the effects and the impact for women. The example, primarily, is divorce. Unfortunately, divorce is quite common in this country, but we see historically that women face a much harsher impact when it comes to financial loss and divorce than men do. Not only are you dealing with emotional hardship, you're also dealing with all of these, other things. You're dealing with having to pay child support, alimony maybe, and, figuring out what am I going to do without this essentially lack of income stream that's now disappeared from my household. All of that's so much to bear. And because of that, it really requires a specific type of planning and preparation to be able to make sure your plan can sustain that sort of change. So going into unexpected life changes, while it can be a lot of different things across the board, positive or negative, it's really important to make sure that you have a plan in place that really bounces with you throughout your lives. And the reason I say that is because a lot of individuals, when it comes to their own finances, are reactionary. And for example, if I were to throw a pen across the room all of a sudden, you would be like, what the hell? And you'd flinch. That's a reaction. However, if I were to tell you I'm about to throw a pen across the room, then you wouldn't flinch, most likely, I'm going to hope, for this analogy in any case. And your plan needs to be preventative, essentially. So you're not reacting after some change has already happened. And so you're not wasting time and money to fix what's already been done, but instead have a plan that can be flexible enough to move with you throughout your stages of life. So you can save that time and money for other things. Hopefully that makes sense. I'm seeing heads nodding. Okay. So the next challenge here is caregiving. So unfortunately, caregiving does typically fall on most women, whether that be, caring for your child or caring for an aging parent, aging grandparent, whatever it may be. And not only is this obviously a huge emotional drain, it's also a financial drain and a huge time constraint. A lot of women find themselves either quitting their jobs entirely to take care of an individual, or having to take more time off of work, having to do part-time, whatever it may be. And because of that, obviously it's less money in their pocket. And we find that, historically, those time and the resources spent caring for that person can't be exactly made up across their lifetime moving forward. If they're taking care of an aging parent and that parent, passes away, they can't be like, all right, now I can get back into my financial plan. It's not how it works. Because, as I'm sure you know, time is our most valuable asset, and the earlier you start on a plan, the better off you'll be. And because you're essentially taking all this time away to care for that person that you love so much, you're essentially setting yourself back incredibly. And no matter how much time or money you try to put back into your plan, the compounding and the growth that you have when you're younger is priceless, and you just can't make that up. So that being said, like you see here, 62% of family caregivers are women. And I find with the individuals that I sit down with, there's honestly a huge lack of honest conversation. Granted, it's a tough one to have, especially if it's regarding your parents, but most families assume that if caregiving is needed, it's going to fall on women, without actually talking about the consequences of what that might bring for that individual. So it's so, so important to make sure you have those honest conversations with your family or with the individuals involved, as morbid as it might be. Next up is probably not a challenge that you might consider, or really a challenge at all, because we all want to live long lives, right? However, of course, because we can't have it all be hunky-dory, longevity is something you do need to consider somewhat as a challenge, because while women typically live longer, that means you need much more income to expand across that lifespan to be able to support your lifestyle. And especially if you're in a traditional household, where it's a man and a woman, women do typically live longer than men. And because of that, what I find with a lot of my clientele is, unfortunately, there's not enough planning done to prepare for what happens when that man is gone and the woman's left alone. A lot of the times, women have to pick up the pieces, and it's not pretty. The estate planning wasn't there, the proper financial plan wasn't there, and now they not only are experiencing this terrible loss, but they're also having to experience this financial disaster, essentially, with the fees of probate, having lawyers get involved, having people randomly come back into their lives and try to take the money of their loved one. It's a very frustrating process for this individual, and this can be avoided with the proper planning. That being said, outside of just estate planning in general, when it comes to longevity, the fact that individuals are essentially stuck on their own after the individual were to pass away has a lot of different effects on their finances, outside of just estate planning in general. That could be changes to their Social Security, limiting their retirement savings, so on and so forth. So lastly is probably not a challenge that you maybe would think of off the top of your head. This is one that I've actually seen just based on my experience in the financial advising space. I mentioned it a little bit before. Financial advisors are primarily men. And because of that, there really is not a lot of support for women in the industry. And as you can see here, 15 to 20% of all advisors are female. We have a long way to go to continue to try to make up a majority of the industry. And like I said, it's very common for male advisors to want to have male clientele, and women are left out of the loop because of it. So while it might not be essentially a challenge right off the top of your head, but knowing that's an opportunity that you're missing out on just because of the majority says so is something that needs to be considered when it comes to comprehensive financial planning. Not only that, I find that there's this notion, as traditional as it might be, that men are the primary breadwinners of the family, even though that is a very old statistic. And as of right now, about more than 60% of women are actually breadwinners in America. However, because there's this traditional notion going around, again, male advisors will seek out men hoping to have more assets to play around with, rather than seek out women who deserve a financial plan. Any questions? So, you may or may not be feeling a little bit overwhelmed after all the terrible challenges that I talked about. So I don't want you to be overwhelmed, because financial advisors like myself have been working on strategies and really some solutions that we can offer to help mitigate some of these risks. Because we've seen women go through this for decades, and we know that there's some solutions we can provide, albeit not, all-encompassing solutions that can help manage some of these risks. So I will say, in regards to the solutions, some of these challenges that we talked about, you might be like, well, I'm not really worried about caregiving because I just won't give care. Like, I don't need to worry about that. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about some of these challenges that you see are just indisputable, like living longer, things like that. Like, I hope you live longer, like that's the point, right? So, these solutions really, again, are tempered to help mitigate some of the risks, not eliminate it entirely, but see these risks that really sometimes you can't do anything about and help you a little bit along the way in your financial journey. So first things first is just simply getting started. I see so many people that I sit down with who have what I call paralysis by analysis. They are just presented with so many options that they just don't do anything at all. That's the worst thing that you can do. Getting started is crucial. Even if it's small, like if you have a retirement plan and you're not sure how much you should be contributing, so you don't contribute anything at all, just do $25 a month, or like something. That will help you more than anything else. So getting started is so important. And getting started early will help you manage those risks that we talked about, because the earlier you start, the more compounding comes into play, the more growth opportunity there is for you to make up some of that money that you will lose because of those challenges that maybe you can't really, avoid entirely throughout your life. Additionally, I do want to say, in regards to getting started, there's also a sentiment here that I want to express that's along the same lines of just wage and unemployment difficulty that we talked about before. Get started on knowing your self-worth as well, because knowing your self-worth can very much help you in regards to knowing what you deserve to be paid, knowing what job is working and not working, and when you need to essentially leave for a better opportunity. So get started on that, and that'll just rock you to where you need to be. Any questions? Sorry, I don't know why I was doing that. First off, secondly, is to develop a strategy. Now that we've finally gotten started, you need to really take a look at your situation and really first off envision your future. Where do you want to be in the next 5, 10, 20, 30 years? And from there, just kind of have a general sense of what matters to you. What are your whys, and what family members do you want to continue to be close with? Where are they going to be in your life throughout 20, 30 years? Do you need to support anyone, caregiving wise? Things like that. Envisioning your future long term will help you really have those preventative measures that we talked about, rather than trying to scramble to pick up the pieces after something's already happened. Next up, after you've kind of envisioned your future, you can start building a savings plan. Saving is crucial, as I'm sure you know, and that'll help you down the line to make sure you have all these accumulated savings because you've thought ahead, and to help you with any risks down the road. Next, that's create a budget. I'll say it's entirely true, despite this notion, that you can pay yourself first instead of saving first. Make sure that you have enough money to cover the expenses and covering your cost of living before, again, taking time for somebody else. Now that you've created a budget, you've encountered what you may or may not need to be saving, then now that you have all these numbers together, you can finally set a goal and set them realistically, because you know what you can and cannot afford. And from there, maybe you can adjust if you need to and understand what needs to be done to either get to those goals that maybe are a little bit unattainable and realize which ones are. So third is one of my favorite solutions, and it's invest like a woman. So when it comes to investing, please come in. You're totally fine. page. Alright, we're switching up chairs here. We're just gonna play musical chairs. So yeah, just picking up where we left off. The third solution here is going to be investing like a woman. So there's this very common misconception, I won't even say in the industry, I'd say across America, that women don't know how to trade and that they're very hands-off when it comes to investing. In actuality, women, while they do trade less than men, they actually get better returns than men. And that's typically because men will essentially overtrade. They're way too confident in their own abilities. And because of that, they rack up all these fees and all these expenses, commissions and whatnot. And any return that they do make is essentially eating away their profit. So, what does it mean to essentially invest like a woman? Well, women are very conscious about, their place in their own life. And because of that, they have what's called healthy investing, which is essentially taking their situation and understanding what risks they can and cannot take. There's age-based investing, which is just simply looking at their age, like, well, I'm close to retirement, so I definitely shouldn't be investing in a hedge fund that returns 200%. I can't do that. And long-term investing, understanding that they don't need to be trading a lot to get to the goals that they need to. And of course, one of the other solutions is simply building a team. There's a lot that goes on with your finances, and making sure you have the right people around you is really important. Investors are only as good as the people that surround them, and because of that, you want to make sure you have access to professionals that you trust, and that will give you the right information. And, just as an advisor speaking, I can tell you, and I can't speak for any other advisor, when it comes to working with my particular practice, obviously there's the advantage of experience and layered advice, but also educational resources, making sure you're continuing to stay in the know on what's going on with the market, what challenges might be presented to women that maybe we can talk about today, or really anything else. When it comes to building a financial plan, your financial advisor shouldn't be the only person involved as well. So when it comes to building a team, it should be, of course, you, maybe your advisor, a lawyer, estate planning attorney, a tax advisor. All of them should be working in tandem with each other, because your finances encompass way too much of your life to just trust one person with it. So, moving on from there. The last solution is really going to be never stop learning. Making sure you're always in the know. Making sure you're adopting the mindset of a learner is really important, because obviously your finances are really important. But that being said, if you do have a trusted professional taking care of your finances, or an accountant, whoever it may be, you want to make sure you're in the know as much as they are. And make sure whatever decisions they are making on your behalf, you understand fully as well. Not only that, making sure you're educated can also really ease your mind about what's going on with your finances, and know you're doing essentially the best in your own ability to do what you can to meet those goals in the future. So one thing I'll add here is, where can you actually get financial education? Obviously, you can get it from your friendly local nonprofit, but you can also get it from your financial advisor. Financial advisors are lucky enough to have a lot of resources that are tested, and really the numbers are always going to be correct, yada yada, run through all these different companies to make sure they're reflecting the most accurate and most up-to-date information as possible. That being said, if you don't have an advisor, there's other places that you can get that information. A lot of employers will have some sort of financial wellness education through them. The state also provides some financial wellness education as well. And of course, there's the internet. You got the whole world in your pocket. However, I would be very, very wary about trying to decide your financial decisions through the internet, because as I'm sure you know, there's a boatload of misinformation on there. So make sure you use trusted sources, and maybe if you don't want to use an advisor for their resources, ask them at least what resources you should be using. All right, so just to wrap up from there, we talked about a lot of different challenges that women face, throughout their time on this earth in America. And we know that, with these solutions, we can I will say that it's incredibly important to not understate really the role of a financial advisor in creating a good financial plan. And the reason I say that is, the best way I can describe this is an advisor is like your doctor. Like, your doctor is essentially there to help you get to whatever ideal lifestyle you want to be by encouraging you and collaborating with you to essentially enforce preventative measures to make sure you don't fall ill with disease or whatever it might be. An advisor does the same thing. They're encouraging you to take these plans and have preventative measures to make sure you don't fall, in this case, into disaster. Having a good financial plan is not better than having a plan is not ideal if it's not the right plan. So you want to make sure you're not doing yourself any harm by having the wrong plan just for the sake of having one. Lastly, I just want to thank everyone for listening today. I hope you got some education out of this presentation. You have my business card. If you flip on the back, you'll be able to schedule a one-on-one consultation with me if you're interested, which is free, by the way. And of course, I'd love to hear your feedback. If you have any notes, any questions that maybe you didn't think of after our discussion today, you are more than welcome to give me a call, shoot me a text, and let me know.
I have a question.
Sure.
I have children that I'm trying to get set up in ways that are better than I was set up.
Sure.
My son is 21. He has, a few things going on for himself. My daughter's only 16. Is it too early to start, looking at some of those options for her now on a larger scale than just savings accounts and money markets and things like that?
Sure. I'm sure you've heard this before, but it's never too early to start planning. And with her, if you're interested in getting growth, because she does have that long time horizon, which is a huge advantage, you can even start retirement accounts. She doesn't necessarily have to be employed, she just has to be earning money.
Do they have to be custodial, or can she have them on her own?
No, she can have her own account on her name, but you can also have it be custodial if you want to go that route. Oh, that's interesting. Thank you.
So she asked a question that I'm going to ask out loud, because I answered it, but I want you to give more insight.
Sure.
When you said that you need to have a good team and different people working together for you, she said, "Does that cost money?" And of course, yes. But can you just explain how one might start if they have very minimal income, or what it takes to start saving early?
Sure. That's a great question. And don't be shy and ask it. So when it comes to starting a team, I would say the best place to start is with an advisor. Again, I can't speak for other advisors. Myself personally, I don't charge for consultations. So even if we decided to not move forward with any business, like you already had assets that were great and we didn't need to touch them, I essentially wouldn't be charging you at all. I can't speak for other advisors, but for me, essentially, it would just be, okay, we'll keep meeting up, we'll keep reviewing your plan, making sure you're where you need to be, and then you start bringing other individuals into the fold when it's necessary. So when an individual starts to have a moderate amount of income, we want to make sure a tax advisor is also in on that conversation, and unfortunately tax advisors do charge, depending on which one you go with. Typically I work with an individual's already pre-existing tax advisor, so they kind of already have that relationship, but I work on a team of advisors that we already have a professional network set up, so if you don't have an accountant, we can refer you on to one that we've worked with before and know what they're going to be charging, etc. And that's the same thing with estate planning. My senior partner, who's also an advisor, his brother is an estate planner. So we got everybody into the family, basically. So to answer your question, it's typically starting slow and then adding them into the fold when necessary. Because if you're starting young, as you should be, you're not going to have that income anyways to be able to pay for those services. So just starting small is important, and then obviously bringing those people in when necessary.
So would you start by suggesting a budget to gain some sort of savings and to then be able to invest? Is that what you're suggesting?
Essentially, I mean, it depends on each person's situation, so I'll say, generally, typically what we want to do is establish monthly affordability first, understand, how much money do you have coming in, how much money is going out, how much of this really is worth keeping around expense-wise, like what can we get rid of, and then from there, establishing how much you should be saving, and then seeing if you have money available to essentially work for you, so to grow, to invest, whatever.
So if somebody came to you and said, I have $400 to invest, would you say that's not enough yet, or would you start investing it for them?
Does it have to be that much?
I just threw it up.
$5.
So,
$5 goal that you made money for.
some people will come to me and they're literally like, I want to do this, I don't really care what you have to say. And I'll be like, that's not really how it works.
Right.
I'm here to be a fiduciary for you. I have to legally act in your best interest. So I'm always going to do a massive, not massive, we'll say a thorough review first, because we can still invest that $400, absolutely, if you want to do that. But if that's $400 of your savings, I mean, you might be like, I don't know if that's the best idea. Let's instead drop a systematic mutual fund opportunity, and instead, if you have a monthly affordability of like only $100, let's start with $25 and just keep you investing for the time being until your monthly affordability goes up.
Would you suggest that person open an IRA, or would you invest it in stock, or what would you?
It's up to that person's individual situation.
What do you think of Public? Do you know that, the app? With the
Is it
investing, I think that's what it's called. Because I have that, but I don't want to do anything.
Robinhood? That's
Yeah.
really popular.
I mean, those are all great ways to start investing. The problem is that individuals don't typically know what they're doing with their investments. Like, it's great to play around, and I encourage people to, have that enthusiasm for investing. But if you're doing it usually for the sake of growth. But if you're just doing it with penny stocks, which is essentially what you're playing around with, it's not really an active strategy that will work towards your long-term goals. Hopefully that makes sense.
More along the lines of something to do, you may as well go down to the casino.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I go that far, because there's certainly some great intention behind wanting to start investing. It's just making sure, like, if you have that desire to grow your money, then, do it right, essentially.
Now, do you work with a lot of people in their own businesses, or do you mostly work with employees and that are having a regular paycheck and stuff like that?
I work with both. I really, because I work with a lot of women, I really do like working with individuals women specifically, who are business owners. Because, I mean, not only are you facing the odds, you're really just want to go all in, and I love that in my clientele. So I do work with business owners, but I, of course, work with, the average retail consumer who, has a steady paycheck and whatnot. But I personally find it easier to relate to individuals who are running a business, because sometimes your income, isn't always steady, and you need to, essentially face that and come up with a plan for, when you really don't make that much money this month or even the next, because I'm an independent contractor. Technically, this is my own business, so I know the feeling.
And also, we have a part 2 to this workshop, which we're going to be running on April, was that date 2nd? Saturday, April 2nd, same time, same place, and that one is geared towards
Small business owners.
female small.
So
Yes,
I
of
wanna
course,
ask
if that
you-
wasn't obvious.
So like, what's your take on investing in term life insurance?
On term life?
Yeah, any life insurance, I'll just put it out there that way.
Yeah, so I'll say that life insurance really has expanded immensely in the past several decades in regards to what it can offer. Life insurance used to just be, you pay a premium and then you get money when you die, and guess what, you don't really get to reap the benefits while you're alive. And because of that, insurance companies kind of looked at the products they were offering, and they're like, we need more of an incentive for people to invest and actually, take this. Of course, I think insurance is extremely, incredibly important to any financial plan, but there's so much more to it now than just the death benefit. Now there's cash value. You can actually essentially have a tax advantage retirement account at your feet with some of the life insurance that's now being offered. So in just regards to term in general, that doesn't reap the same benefits as permanent life insurance. It doesn't have that cash value. It doesn't have those other benefits. But it could be good for you if you have some limited liabilities that you want to make sure are covered. So it, again, I hate to keep saying this, depends on the person's individual situation.
Right.
Can you explain like opening up an IRA and how that works, like with when it comes time to do your taxes? Like, is there a specific amount of like tax, I guess, credit that you get when you do that and invest in an IRA? Or is that a question for like an accountant?
Based on the answer that you're trying to get, I'm going to say it's for a tax advisor, unfortunately. I can certainly talk about an IRA in general, but I can't go into taxes because, unfortunately.
It's part of that too.
Yeah. But I get somebody else to talk about it, but.
Now you said like waiting to, while you're still small or something, waiting to add in those other team members. When would you know it's time to be like, I need a professional tax advisor, not just an accountant,
Right, so I would say when you're starting to make a larger income, so that's obviously relative, and I would say that's up to the advisor to decide. But if you're making enough money to not only max out your qualified accounts, which would be your retirement accounts, and then start investing in non-retirement accounts, that is when I would say it's time to bring in a tax advisor. That makes sense. We've talked about an IRA, but I just can't talk about tax.
Something I recently learned, so.
Maxing out 6,000, and I mean it is tax advantage, so of course there's some advantages there. No pun intended.
So it depends on if you want to get hit up front or hit later.
That makes sense. She's asking about the difference between an IRA and a 401k.
Oh yeah, so a 401k is typically through your employer. It's a pre-tax plan, so when you turn 59 and a half, you essentially have to pay all the taxes back. The IRA is independent of your employment, so you can carry it with you from employer to employer, which is a huge benefit because typically what happens with a 401k when you leave your job, which, by the way, the average person changes careers, not even jobs, 6 to 12 times throughout their life. So, because of that,
On target.
because of that, they leave behind a lot of the amount of people that I sit down with that are like, yeah, I think I have a 401k like lying around somewhere. Like, that's your money. Take it back. But
If you don't touch it, so it's still accruing interest at least.
yeah,
So
so
what would you say is best? Like if you're gonna end up having to pay taxes back on that, would you move it over to an IRA? Is that smarter?
So, again, I'll say depends on the person's situation, but personally, I find it to be much more beneficial for my clients to move over a 401k, especially if it's just a small amount. I mean, large or small amount, I'd still recommend moving it over because the problem with leaving your 401k there is essentially you can't contribute to it anymore. It is just earning whatever it's earning. But the effect of contributions, whether it's large or small, is priceless. Because essentially what happens when you're contributing is you're moving up the cost basis for what you're investing. So if the market were to absolutely tank, that means that so would your money. Because all you're doing is essentially just working from the balance that you're not contributing to. If you're contributing, like I said, you're moving up the cost basis, and it's going to be much easier for you to bounce back when the market goes down because your cost basis is moved up for you. You have any questions, Fiona?
I feel like I could just keep asking questions. More for everybody else.
No more questions then?
Thank you. Of course. And if anyone has anything like very particular to their situation, like you can always talk to me one-on-one if you don't want to expose it in a group setting. I wouldn't blame you.
Okay, so this video, along with the PDF presentation, is going to be available on the Moxie Women's Foundation website, just as soon as it's looked over, and made sure that, you know, it's good for the compliance team. And then again, on April 2nd at 10 a.m., here at Moxie headquarters, 1105 Route 32 Stillwater, we're going to have part 2 of this, which is focused on female business owners. And that presentation will again be live streamed to the YouTube channel and then put on the website, and all of the good PDFs will be available as well. So thank you again, Jessica, for coming in and talking.